Hello ladies and gents, welcome to CG Reacts, and this is why the US Air Force just rushed F-16s back toward Iran. This is my channel Navy Decoded. It's been a while since I did Navy Decoded video. So yeah, I saw many headlines about F-16. I'm pretty sure even Max Afterburner video popped up. So F-16s are being rushed into Iran for specific job. Yeah, things are changing again because US has stopped bombing Iran. Then Iran launched a massive strikes on bases. USA starts to bomb again. Obviously, they are planning something different this time. So I guess this is just a pattern, isn't it? Like they're bringing a lot of F-16 in for specific job. Navy Decoded is a great channel to like dissect things like this. It's gonna be awesome. Let's do this one.
On the 1st of July, 2026, a squadron of F-16s landed back at its home base in Germany, ordered out of the Middle East after a ceasefire had been signed. The work was finished. 6 days later, the ceasefire collapsed. On the 17th of July, 4 flights of 3 lifted out of Spangdahlem and turned east, with a package of tankers up to carry them. 16 days on the ground, and most of that spent watching the reason they had come home fall apart. Here is what makes that strange. The region was not short of air power. More than 330 American aircraft were already in theater, spread across 3 major air bases. 2 carrier air wings were
More than a lot of Air Force, apparently.
operating offshore. Another 113 aircraft sat staged within reach, among them 13 F-22s, 48 F-35As, and 40 F-15Es. 86 tankers were committed or inbound. With all of that already in place, the aircraft the Pentagon moved on short notice was a design first flown in the 1970s, and one that shows up on radar the way every conventional fighter does. That decision only makes sense under one condition. There has to be a task inside this campaign that specifically calls for this aircraft, and calls for it badly enough to fly a squadron back across 2 continents to get it. There is such a task. It has nothing to do with which airframe is superior, and everything to do with which one carries a particular weapon, and what a stealth aircraft is structurally unable to do about a radar that never switches on. Air defense is a conversation. Somebody has to speak first, and it is never the side you would expect. At Navy Decoded, we work out who talks and who listens. Every air campaign has an order, and the order is decided by who can afford to be seen. To see why, start with what it actually takes to kill an air defense network, and why that is much harder than flying over one.
One of the reason I'm guessing it's because of like a per hour cost of flying. F-16s are much cheaper in that way, so you can fly a lot of F-16s constantly.
Start with what Iran had left. Its air defenses took heavy losses beginning in February of 2026, but losses are not erasure. What survived got dispersed, camouflaged, and kept moving. If you cannot contest the sky in the air, make it expensive from the ground, and never stand still long enough to be found twice. Which runs into the physics that governs every radar ever built. A radar sees by transmitting, and if it transmits nothing, it sees nothing. But that energy travels in both directions, so the same beam that lets it look is also a signal announcing where it stands to anyone with a receiver. A radar is dangerous only while it is on, and safe only while it is off. It cannot protect and survive at the same time. Now put a stealth aircraft into that equation. The F-35 crosses the airspace and the radar never sees it, so the radar never transmits, so nobody ever finds it. The mission succeeds, and the site that was supposed to stop it ends the night untouched. Which is a complete answer for one aircraft on one night, and no answer at all for a war. A campaign is hundreds of sorties across weeks, and most of what flies in them cannot hide. Tankers hold orbits for hours within reach of the coast.
That is such a good point. F-35 is like first responders. You need F-35 in the early stages. But if things are intensifying, you want some cheaper option, and stealth is not the 100% thing you're looking for. Yeah, you need to look for like non-stealthier option, F-16s obviously. And F-16s are also smaller. You would think F-16s are the worst plane there is, because they're not the stealth plane. They're not heavy and powerful like F-15s. They're not advanced like F-18, which is like 4.5 gen. They're 4th gen single jet engines. But in specific scenarios, it's very nimble, right? It's very cheap to maintain, cheap to run, and there are way too many spare parts because basically most countries you can think of probably have F-16. Even Pakistan have F-16. So because of that, F-16 becomes much better option.
Transports land at forward fields. Rescue helicopters have to reach a downed crew. Every one of those is a large, slow radar target, and the site that ignored the F-35 will not ignore any of them. So it has to be dealt with directly, and that requires a sequence which runs backwards from instinct. The first step is to make the radar switch on, because a site sitting in the dark cannot be located, listed, or attacked. It only transmits when something worth engaging shows up in front of it. Then, in the seconds after it reveals itself, the objective inverts. Now it has to be taken out of the fight, before the crew works out what that transmission just cost them and cuts the power. Make it speak so you can find it, then finish it before it stops speaking. That gap is measured in seconds, and everything in this business happens inside it, which is why there is a radar somewhere on that map that has been switched off since the war began. It sits in perfect working order, absent from every target list, waiting for something worth turning on for. And it will still be there when the next strike package comes through. If something has to get shot at before that site can be dealt with, the next question is what volunteers and how it survives.
Is that where we are right now? We are sacrificing F-16 so we know what hidden radars are there. I mean, that makes sense. That's a genius in a way. I'm sure people will cry in the internet, look at that, we shot down American jets. But in the end of the day, results matter. And if this is the only way you can weed out where the other SAMs and radars are, might as well. Can you do that without risking like a pilot though? I mean, I don't know.
Two terms get used interchangeably here, and they describe entirely different jobs. Suppression means forcing a crew to shut their radar down. The equipment is untouched, but for as long as it stays dark, a corridor opens above it. Fire an anti-radiation missile, and this is often what you get. The operator cuts the power to save the antenna, and the corridor lasts a few minutes. Destruction means the antenna, the launcher, and the command vehicle stop existing. That site does not come back at all. And an air defense network is not only radars. The launchers, the command vehicles, and the storage bunkers behind them transmit nothing at all. Silent things cannot be located by listening, so they are found through intelligence and removed with guided bombs instead. The radar is the door. Everything behind it is the house. The July tasking covered both, and that is the real answer to why the deployment was urgent. Nobody needed more aircraft to fly over Iranian air defenses. They needed aircraft that could permanently remove what stealth can only route around. Which aircraft then? The field narrows one door at a time. Start with the weapon. Killing a radar requires an anti-radiation missile, the AGM-88 family, and the aircraft everybody thinks of first is the F-35. It can carry the AGM-88. On external pylons, which breaks the shape that makes it stealthy and sacrifices the only attribute that justifies the airframe. Carrying it internally requires the AGM-88G and the Block 4 software package, and the Government Accountability Office reports that package running 5 years late and $6 billion over, with the milestone now sliding to 2031. That door closes and the problem moves to tempo. This work is not a sortie. It is continuous pressure, night after night, because launchers relocate and radars switch on and off whenever their crews decide to. That requires numbers, and being stealthy is the reason the F-35 gets reserved for the targets only stealth can reach. Spending it as nightly bait burns the scarcest asset in theater on work a cheaper airframe does better. At which point the obvious question arrives, because two supercarriers were sitting right there. In July of 2026, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS George H.W. Bush were both operating in the region, and each one carries a squadron of
I'm a construction guy, so only parallel I can make is like when you want to cut a slab with like laser precision with core cutting, yeah, there's a place for that. But if you want to cut down all of the RCs and everything, all the slab and everything, yeah, you probably need a sledgehammer, jackhammer, but you get the point, right? You need things like F-16. Stealth plane has their own specific job. You don't want to use stealth plane 24/7 because stealth plane have their own downsides. And if you don't need stealth, there are better alternatives.
A-18G Growlers, the aircraft purpose-built for this mission. This is where the arithmetic disappoints. A carrier air wing carries exactly one Growler squadron, and a Growler squadron is about 7 aircraft. 2 carriers means roughly 14 airframes, covering a network spread across a country nearly 5 times the size of Germany. Yeah. Subtract maintenance, crew rest, and the jets held back for other tasking, and the number available on any given night is lower still. The Growler is not short of capability. it is short of copies of itself. One more name has to go, and it is the most reasonable on the list. The F-15E Strike Eagle flies from land, there are plenty of them, and it is fully qualified to carry the AGM-88. But it has no emitter location pod, so it cannot build an electromagnetic picture while airborne. It can kill a radar that has already been found. The problem here is the finding, which leaves one line on the list. The 480th Fighter Squadron at Spangdahlem, pod and weapon integrated for decades, aircrew trained on nothing else, and enough airframes in the wider F-16 fleet to keep doing it every night. Once the ceasefire broke, nobody had to deliberate. The official record says the same thing. In May of 2026, 6 F-16 pilots received the Distinguished Flying Cross for high-risk flights over central Iran, protecting a bomber formation from surface-to-air missile fire. The general presenting the award put it plainly: the strike that helped end the 12-day war does not happen without those 6 airmen. So the Pentagon did not recall the F-16 because it was the best available option. It recalled it because it was the one platform in the Air Force inventory that could find the target and kill the target and still be there to do it again tomorrow. Knowing it can do that job...
What? F-16's pilot were the one getting an award like that, and they were the instrument behind like 12 oh my god, I didn't know that. This is like a fat illustration video in the making, basically.
Still does not explain how. And once you hear the method, most people conclude it sounds like a slow way to get killed. Making a radar transmit sounds straightforward, right up until you have to answer the obvious question. Give it what, exactly? There is no gentle way to phrase the answer. You give it an aircraft. An F-16 CJ flies into defended airspace and waits to be locked up. That is not an accepted risk attached to the mission. That is the mission. The 480...
I mean, you have certain drones that mimics signature of an aircraft that you used during Epic Fury. I'm pretty sure the general literally said, like, we can't do anything without these drones. He said about that drone that you send first to, like, confuse the system, and he said that about the Lucas drones as well. So you have the drones. You don't really need to, like, send F-16, do you? So to me, it feels like there must be more than just that. Maybe there's an element of it, but it's like bigger picture than that.
IF's motto compresses it into 4 words: first in, last out. The natural objection arrives immediately. Why not send a drone? Cheaper, and there is no crew in it. Because bait only works if it is convincing. A fire control radar switches on for something with the radar cross-section and flight profile of a real fighter, and a target that reads as too small or moves too predictably gets classified as a decoy and ignored. And even when the bait works, it has solved half the problem. Something still has to be there, carrying a weapon, ready to kill the radar before the crew can shut it down. That something carries the AN/ASQ-213, the HARM targeting system, mounted on the intake hardpoint and doing all its work by listening. It catches hostile radar emissions, sorts them by signature, and builds a picture of what is out there: the range, the bearing, and what type of system each return belongs to. Because the pod never transmits, the crew being measured has no indication it is happening. They light up the sky looking for the F-16, and in that instant, they hand over their own position. Lay out the options available to that battery, and the shape of the problem becomes visible. Engage, and an anti-radiation missile arrives at better than Mach 2, riding the beam back down from as far as 43 nautical miles out. Cut power the moment it launches, and the older weapons genuinely do lose the target, but the AGM-88E has already recorded the coordinates and switches to a millimeter wave seeker in the final seconds to find the antenna on its own. Stay dark permanently, and the battery survives every night of the war without ever affecting one. No option on that list produces a radar that is both alive and useful. The crew is not losing because they are outmatched. They are losing because every option arrives at the same place, and the only variable is whether they lose the equipment or lose the point of having it. One question is still standing. If the job is to be deliberately targeted, what keeps the aircraft in one piece? It is called Angry Kitten, and it began as a joke at the enemy's expense. The Georgia Tech Research Institute built it to play the enemy in training, imitating hostile jamming so American crews could practice against it. It fooled the most modern radars on the friendly side well enough that the pilots being fooled asked whether they could have it. The general who told that story put it in their words. The blue team said, "We kind of need that. Can we have that for us?" What makes it work is the difference between hiding and lying. Older jamming radiates noise at high power. The radar knows it is being jammed and cannot see through it, and a screen full of noise is itself information. The operator knows something is coming, and roughly where. Angry Kitten does the opposite. Its digital radio frequency memory captures the incoming radar pulse, adjusts the phase and the timing and the amplitude, and sends it back. What returns is technically flawless and factually wrong. It reports no interference at all. It reports a target in the wrong place, or 10 targets where nothing is standing. And because the software is open, it can be reprogrammed in flight. So
See, this is what I mean by America going crazy with the technology. Look at that Angry Kitten, literally mimicking and making it flawless. Whenever you jam something, it's true, like it's just like insane noise. It's like they know something is jamming us. They'll basically put it on the like top gear and run away. No, this is not jamming. This is sophisticated signal sending back. Oh, there's nothing here, no problem.
So when the radar hops frequencies to defeat the jamming, the pod follows in real time. The F-16 is not hiding its shape. It is hiding the truth about its shape. The crew on the ground still sees an aircraft, just not the one that is actually there. But a single jet listening alone still produces a middle-grade solution. Good enough to ride a beam that is still transmitting. Not good enough to bomb a coordinate the radar has already abandoned. And closing that gap has nothing to do with building a better pod. It takes a second aircraft, and the reason is geometry. Put an F-16 and a Growler in two different places and have both catch the same radar pulse. Radio waves travel fast, but not instantly, so that pulse reaches the two aircraft microseconds apart. Share that timing difference over the data link, and the region of uncertainty collapses. Add more listeners, and it collapses further. The result is a jump in grade rather than a jump in technology. The solution goes from good enough to launch a missile to good enough to drop a bomb, which is the difference between...
I like how this is like echolocation, but with light waves, not sound waves. That's what basically this is. How to figure it out? This how.
Suppression and destruction stated as geometry rather than tactics. Its listening is done by the AN/ALQ-218, housed in the two fairings at the wingtips, working passively across the spectrum and sorting everything it hears. Radars, communications, even the control links running to drones. The jamming itself belongs to the pods slung underneath. And there, the Growler is in the middle of a generational change. The AN/ALQ-99 has been the tactical jamming pod since the early 1970s. Its replacement, the AN/ALQ-249, only reached initial operating capability in 2021. Growlers flying these missions have gone out carrying an ALQ-249 under one wing and a legacy ALQ-99 under the other. The Pentagon's own test office has reported that the newer jammer, with its current software, is not yet suitable for operational missions. The most modern equipment in the American inventory is still being worked on, while the war it was built for is running. Now, the part that makes the pairing work, and it
That has been the case for like many militaries nowadays, where like we have the technology is just there, but just not just there enough. Like in America, that's true with many things. Like a lot of drones are being made, which will be here in like next 3-4 years, but it's not here now. From Fury and everything, right? B-21 is like done basically, but it's like it's gonna take time for the production, like few years still, right? Even Russia had that problem. Russia has bigger problem than that, but still, like the T-14, like okay, that works, but we don't have it. Su-57, not a great stealth plane, but it's still a good plane. We don't have enough of them. Maybe put more years into it, make a big production, make a lot of like, then maybe do warfare. Yeah, so Russia basically like jumped the gun there. Imagine if Russia had like 100 Su-57. Maybe they would have done something, right? Maybe they would have had air dominance, even though it's not a stealth plane, not really. It besides stealth, it was like really like advanced feature is there with radars and everything, right? Not as good as American, but still. So like every country has this issue, like we have something is almost there, always like on our fingertips, but not completely here.
Turns on a distinction between two kinds of radar. The early warning sets sweep wide and turn slowly. Iran fields the Ghadir, an over-the-horizon array reaching out past 1,000 kilometers, and the Matla-ul-Fajr, a mobile VHF radar built to see what shorter wavelengths miss. Both are watching enormous volumes of sky, which means any single point in it gets illuminated a few times a minute. Enough to raise an alarm, not enough to shoot. And because the beam only brushes past, hard to locate precisely. Fire control radars are the opposite. The sets riding with the Bavar 373, the Khordad 15, the S-300 batteries. To guide a missile, one of them has to illuminate a single target continuously and hold that beam until impact. That continuity makes it the most measurable emitter on the battlefield. The Ghadir speaks quietly, to everybody. A Bavar 373 engagement radar speaks loudly, directly into one face. Only the second says enough to get itself killed, which is why it normally waits. The early warning network finds the target and hands it over, and the engagement radar switches on for a few seconds at the end. That is how it survives. That handoff is the link the Growler cuts. Jam the Matla-ul-Fajr and the communications running between the batteries and their command posts, and the missile crews lose the picture they were being fed. Isolated, a Khordad 15 or a Bavar 373 has to switch on its own engagement radar and search for itself, transmitting earlier, longer, and far more conspicuously than the system was designed around. In that moment, the pod on the F-16 and the receivers on the Growler are both listening. Two vantage points produce one coordinate. The missile goes. And if the battery shoots back, Angry Kitten bends the lock away. The Growler never kills the radar. It forces the radar to reveal itself. Soft kill manufactures the target. Hard kill consumes it. At which point the reasonable question is why the F-16 is needed at all, since the Growler carries up to 4 anti-radiation missiles of its own. It does. The problem is that the two jobs exclude each other physically. Jamming means radiating energy continuously, and an aircraft that is radiating is the brightest thing in the sky. It has to hold a position where its coverage protects the whole package, keep its heading and altitude, and not maneuver. Being bait requires the reverse. Total silence until the trigger, penetration into the most dangerous piece of the airspace, and violent maneuvering the instant the lock comes. A Growler in the middle of a jamming orbit cannot simultaneously be the target it is working to conceal. One has to transmit in order to protect, the other has to stay silent in order to hunt. And because those two jobs cannot be folded into one aircraft, the most expensive thing in this entire story becomes visible. Why is the Air Force borrowing Navy aircraft to open the way for Air Force bombers? Because it has not owned a tactical jamming aircraft since the EF-111A Raven was retired in May of 1998. The role went to the Navy and stayed there. Every large Air Force strike package therefore depends on whether Navy assets are available. Run two theaters at once and the Growlers cannot be in both places. And whatever the Air Force sends up alone is working at half speed.
Yeah, Growler is very sophisticated when it comes to electronic warfare. That's why it has its own designation, EA, right? It's not your normal F-18, even though the frame is the same. So it's like very sophisticated thing. Air Force doesn't have the equivalent, so they have F-16 CJs. That's it. I'm guessing they're probably going to make now one. Like, yeah, I guess we need something like Growler now.
Strength.
No, wait a minute. F-47 can do the same job, right? I mean, it's one of the listings. Like F-47 can do the Growler's job, so maybe they'll just use F-47 for that.
The service that owns the bombers does not own the aircraft that gets them in, and that arrangement was settled in a budget climate which assumed nobody would be flying into a modern air defense network again. The cost showed up inside this very deployment. To find enough suppression aircraft for the Middle East, the Pentagon pulled the 480th out of Spangdahlem, covering one flank by uncovering another, while all three fighter wings permanently assigned to Europe were sending aircraft east. So the July scramble is not a measurement of how capable the F-16 is. It is a measurement of how few exist, and how fast that number runs out when two theaters ask at once. The scarce commodity in modern air warfare was never the stealth aircraft. It is the ones willing to go in first, and they can be counted on your fingers. Go back to that squadron on the ramp in Germany, bags still packed, shortly before it flew back the other way. They did not return because they were the best available aircraft. They returned because the job needed something that could find a radar and kill it and come back for the next one. And the list of aircraft that can do all three is one line long. None of this was ever a story about aircraft generations. An air campaign does not begin with the aircraft hardest to see. It begins with the one willing to be seen. And it works because of something no air defense system on Earth has ever escaped. A radar cannot do its job without announcing itself, so the decision to defend is also the decision to be found. Every crew knows this. None of them can design their way out of it. The entire profession consists of forcing that decision earlier than they want to make it, at the moment somebody is listening. A radar that stays silent survives. A radar that speaks does not. Somebody has to make it speak. Next time you watch an air campaign, do not ask which aircraft dropped the bombs. Ask which one went in first.
It's a group effort, that is true, right? It's never like, it's not like a video game or like a WWE or TV show. Oh, who's the absolute best? That's not how things work usually, right? It's not about being the best. It's about the which is the best suited for the specific task. Right? F-16 CJ has been used in this war for a while now. I've been hearing about F-16 CJs being used left and right. So they are doing that again, obviously. Growlers are like rare in a way, not many of them, right? And Navy has it, not Air Force. You need Air Force to do certain things. When it comes to anything Air Force is probably going to be the dominant one for obvious reasons. So yeah, F-16 CJs are going to be used a lot. And it's cheaper to run. It just makes sense, right? So this makes me think like, yeah, it's getting more methodical. It's getting more like thought out now. This is not just about strikes anymore. It's about long picture, which is a bad news for Iran because US is no longer thinking about just striking. US is thinking, let's finish the job now, right? A deal probably not going to be made. Let's finish the job. That's what America's thinking now. All right, well, there you go. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.